Vladimir Vladimirovich, I cannot help but ask, if we are talking about borders, and what borders do we recognize for Ukraine? You know, we have always recognized the borders of Ukraine within the framework of our agreements after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But I draw your attention to the fact that the Declaration of Independence of Ukraine states, and Russia supported it, that Ukraine is a neutral state. And on this basis, we recognized its borders. But later, as you know, the Ukrainian leadership amended the basic law, and they announced their desire to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. But we did not agree to that. That is the first thing. And secondly, we never and nowhere support any coups d'etat. We do not support it in Ukraine either. We understand and support the people who did not agree with this coup d'etat, and we recognize their right to defend their interests. I have already had several discussions with the UN Secretary General, and there is no secret here. I don't think he'll be angry with me either. He supports those who say that we violated the norms and principles of international law, the UN Charter, that we started military actions in Ukraine. I've already said this, but I'll take advantage of your question, please, and I'll repeat the logic of our actions once again. If in accordance with Article 1, in my opinion, of the UN Charter, every nation has the right to self-determination, then both the people who live in Crimea and the people who live in the southeast of Ukraine, who did not agree with the coup d'etat, which is an illegal, unconstitutional act, have the right to self-determination. Right? That's right. The UN International Court of Justice made a decision regarding Kosovo. Analyzing the situation around Kosovo, it made a decision that any territory declaring its independence should not and is not obliged to ask the opinion and permission of the central authorities of the country to which this territory is currently part at the time of making the decision. Right? Of course it's right, because this is a decision of the International Court of Justice. This means that these territories, including Novorossiya and Donbass, had the right to make a decision on their sovereignty. Right? Of course it's right. This is fully consistent with today's international law and the UN Charter. If this is true, then we had the right to conclude corresponding interstate agreements with these new states. Right? Of course it's right. Did we do it? Yes. We did it. These agreements include provisions on mutual assistance. We ratified them, and we took on certain obligations. And then these newly formed states turned to us with a call for help within the framework of these agreements. We had the opportunity, and we were obliged to do it. And we did it, trying to stop the hostilities started by the Kiev regime in 2014. We did not start any intervention, aggression, and we are trying to stop it. The UN Secretary General listened to all this. He nodded his head silently and said, "Well, yes, fine, but you still attacked." I am not joking. This is exactly word for word. Well, he does not have a rational answer. Where is the mistake in this chain? What did I say wrong? Where did we violate international law and the UN Charter? Nowhere. There are no such violations. And if this is true, then the border of Ukraine should be in accordance with the sovereign decisions of people who live in certain territories and which we call our historical territories. Everything depends on the dynamics of the events taking place. Vladimir Vladimirovich, if we return to the first link in your chain, can we understand that when there is neutrality, then we will talk about the borders? If there is no neutrality, then it is difficult to imagine the existence of any good neighborly relations between Russia and Ukraine. Why? Because it means that Ukraine will be constantly used as a tool in the hands of others, and to the detriment of the interests of the Russian Federation. Thus, the basic conditions for normalizing relations will not be created, and the situation will develop according to an unpredictable scenario. We would very much like to avoid this. On the contrary, we are determined to create conditions for a long-term settlement and for Ukraine to eventually become an independent, sovereign state, so that it would not be a tool in the hands of third countries, and so that it would not be used in their interests. For example, what is happening now on the line of contact, or in the Kursk region? Here they entered the Kursk region. Their losses are colossal. In 3 months of military action, there are more losses than the Kiev regime in the whole of last year, over 30,000. Well, they have lost fewer tanks, now about 200, and last year for the whole year they lost 240 tanks there. I think they simply have fewer tanks, so there are fewer losses. They use fewer tanks. And why are they sitting there, suffering such losses? Because they were ordered from overseas, at any cost, to hold out at least until the elections, to show that all the efforts of the Democratic Party administration in the Kiev direction, in the Ukrainian direction, were not in vain, to hold out at all costs, at any cost. That is the price. I think this is a terrible tragedy, both for the Ukrainian people and for the Ukrainian army. And these decisions are dictated not by military considerations, to be honest, but by considerations of a political nature. Now, in some directions, in the Kupiansk direction, I don't know whether the military said this or not. There are 2 centers of blockade there. In one center, there is practically an encirclement. There, the Ukrainian troops are pressed against the reservoir. About 10,000 grouping is blocked there. In another place, near Kupiansk, about 5,000 soldiers are already surrounded. And they are trying to build pontoon crossings there in order to at least partially evacuate, but our artillery instantly destroys them. In the direction in the area of responsibility of our center group, there are already 2 or 3 blocking areas, 2 for sure, probably. There will be a 3rd soon. The Ukrainian military sees all this, and decisions are made at the political level, not in the interests of the Ukrainian state, and especially not in the interests of the Ukrainian people. If this continues indefinitely, then, of course, this will not lead to the creation of favorable conditions for the restoration of peace, calm and cooperation between neighboring states for a long historical perspective, and this is what we should strive for. This is exactly what Russia strives for. That is why we say that we are ready for peace negotiations, but not on the basis of some of their desires, the name of, which changes from month to month, but on the basis of the realities that are taking shape now, and on the basis of the agreements that were reached in Istanbul. On this basis, based on the realities of today. But we should not be talking about a truce for half an hour or for 6 months, so that they can receive shells. But we should be talking about creating favorable conditions for restoring relations and future cooperation in the interests of two peoples, who are certainly fraternal peoples, no matter how complicated this may be by rhetoric and today's tragic events in relations between Russia and Ukraine. Therefore, our position is clear and understandable. We will act in this direction. We will move in this direction.